My name is Richard Morellis, and I want to welcome you to the Prison Post. This is your podcast for conversations surrounding the need to reform prisons from the perspective of formerly incarcerated people, community members, and leaders in the restorative justice movement. The Prison Post will feature an episode every Wednesday with people who are in the fight to restore lives and heal communities. Welcome back to the Prison Post. My name is Richard Morellis. This is my co-host, Jason Bryant.
Hello, everyone.
Good to see you, Jay.
Good to see you.
We're super excited. We got two close friends of ours here with us today. We actually served time together in Soledad Prison, CTF. Hugo Gonzalez, Mannie Thomas. It's great to have you with us.
Great to be here. It's good to see you guys again, man.
It's great to see you.
Guys.
Look at them smiles.
That's what I was going to say about you guys. Like, whoa, the smiles are bright all across the face, ear to ear.
Hey.
Great smiles. Those are the smiles of freedom right there.
That's right. Freedom smiles.
Yes, sir.
You're the same smiles I had on my face when Rich was bringing burritos to my door.
Hey, we're going to get to that.
I think it's a little bit wider. Smiles just a little bit wider with that freedom attached to it.
Ted's a little bit victimized with roommates, and he says, man, you did all the cooking on the inside. You ain't cooked once since you've been out.
Now with all these restaurants out here.
But I want to give a little bit of introduction to you guys before we get back into our conversation and having some fun. You were both featured on the CNN documentary, The Feminists on Cell Block Y, excuse me. You guys are unique to our show. It's our 16th episode. We have never had two guests who were sentenced to a total of over 100 years to life. And you guys work together today. We've never had two guests with that much. And even though I know we're going to be talking about success stories, program that you guys are leaders and facilitators in, that with your work that you started with in the inside when you're facilitators. But I think today is also a show about hope as well, because there are so many people in our audience who are loved ones of the incarcerated who wonder, what about my son? What about my daughter? They have 36 to life or 25 to life or 50 to life. Is there a possibility for me? And so to see you guys out here, to see you guys free, I just want you to know that you're going to be bringing hope to the thousands of people. I appreciate that. I'll start off with Mannie. Mannie Thomas was sentenced to 32 years to life as a youth. While in prison, he earned five associate degrees in multiple disciplines. Mannie also served as a facilitator for success stories while housed at CTF Soledad Prison. Nearly 2 years ago, Governor Brown took note of his transformation and hard work and commuted Mannie's sentence to 14 years to life. Mannie was found suitable for parole, and upon his release in October of 2019, he was hired as a success stories coach and growth coordinator. Today, he focuses on identifying and securing new sites to deliver success stories program. Mannie has written and edited for online publications and believes in the power of sharing our stories. He strongly believes in community collaboration, which is why he works with Initiate Justice and facilitates healing circles for men on the second Monday of every month. It's Mannie's strong belief that people can be given what they need in society to transform and not be subjected to isolation and trauma. He has dedicated his life to ensure that people have the opportunity and not commit the same harm that he did. And then there's Hugo Gonzalez. Hugo. Hugo Gonzalez is a Success Stories alumni coordinator and a coach. After serving 18 and a half years in prison, he don't look like it. He looks about 25 years old. But after serving 18 and a half years in prison, his sentence was commuted also by Governor Jerry Brown. He was 16 years old when he was sentenced to 3 consecutive life sentences in adult prison. Hugo is a phenomenal artist, advocate, storyteller who is now working with Success Stories. Hugo goes to public forums, conferences, and schools to speak about patriarchy, toxic masculinity, gang intervention, rehabilitation, and reentry. In a little over a month, Hugo will also be going to law school at Loyola Marymount University. Congratulations, Hugo.
Sir.
Thank you. Appreciate
Welcome
that.
to the show, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
That's right. I just want to say, I want to start off by telling on myself a little bit. You guys spend a lot of time talking about toxic male traits and toxic masculinity. And, I'm not people may think I'm a nice guy out here, but I don't always start out that way. And one of my things was, I know as a man, we compare and we compete. And I was always comparing and competing. And one of my character defects was arrogance. And my arrogance literally almost kept me from having the friendships that I do with all of you today. I mean, it was with Jason on the handball court. When I first met him on the handball court, I was a competitor. I saw this guy.
He couldn't take a loss.
I couldn't stand him the first time I met him. Now I'm the godfather of his oldest son.
This is true.
And with Mannie, he was on a big TEDx panel judging speeches. I was like, who's this guy? And really in reality, I wanted to be that guy. And he was younger than me. And I'm like, man. But and that was my arrogance as well. Thank God, like Manny said earlier, we ended up living across from each other, becoming close friends, shared burritos together. When he was preparing for board, we were praying through the crack of my door. And, my brother's got some emotions. He was worried. But, he's blessed with his freedom. And Hugo was a little bit different because I paid him a compliment in a self-help group. And I said, he's got a lot of potential. And he's like, I said it in a way where like I reached that point because I'm the president of Toastmasters, and one day you'll get to where I'm at because I was the cream of the crop in Soledad prison. And
high aspirations.
Hugo kept the resentment for me for a bit, but he forgave me and loved me. And Manny lived right across from me in Soledad in Z-Wing, and Hugo lived right above me. So I had access to both. They both ate hundreds of my burritos, and we're at each other's door. We spent thousands of hours as friends. But what are some of the other? What are thousands of hours hanging out together and forming a bond that is a lifelong bond, I believe. Sure. What are some of the other stories that you remember about either Jay or each other that you think about from time to time while we were there?
I think what comes up for me when we're talking about the group of men that I've had the privilege to get to know and really love, is this idea of consistently questioning whether or not like I'm living up to what I need to be doing as an individual, right? Like the continuously holding me accountable. There has been, I think, specifically you and Jay Rich, where there was times where you guys would come up to me and say, "Look, you're not doing enough." Because my fallback was, I was in that arrogant place too. Like, I had by the time I had met you guys, I had created multiple groups. And I remember the first time I heard Jay talking about what he was working on to get his master's, and I was like, master's? Like, I don't even have my bachelor's yet. So it was that instant feeling of like, oh, I'm not really doing anything. Like, we can sit here and talk about those 5 associate's degrees, but it just felt like nothing. But it didn't seem like it was coming from a judgmental place. It was just like, oh, like you can do more. Like there's no reason for, because and then what was beautiful about it is I'm getting this sense of you could do more from Jay, and then Rich would come behind him with, not only can you do more, but you should be doing more, because those gifts that you have are not yours. Like, you're supposed to be giving that to other people. And being able to like shift my paradigm in that way is the reason why I'm able to live this life of service. And it's changed, my relationship with my family. It's changed my relationship, my marriage. It's changed my friendships. So being a part of this collective and this group that we created with each other, holding ourselves accountable, has drastically changed my life, and I'm sure it forever will.
That's great.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
What about you, Hugo?
So for me, what stands out is, so ever since I was a young teenager, I felt like I knew it all, and I had this way of thinking or feeling like, let me gauge who's surrounding me. Let me gauge the people that are surrounding me and put them in the category depending on where I feel they're gauging at. So for a long time, that was saturated with the negative lifestyle, with the whole gang lifestyle and revolving in violence and telling myself like, okay, this guy's willing to go that far. These guys are not. And I always gauge myself in saying I could do what they do. I could do what the main ones are doing. When I got to Soledad, the perspective changed. And it changed because it was obvious that what I was standing for was straight BS. But to actually be able to listen to individuals elaborate on that, that was even more clear for me. But more than anything else, I continued with this gauging way of doing things. And I'm not saying that it was completely working for me, but what it did do for me is it did give me that motivation of I could do that as well. So in the same way that I was looking up to people in a negative way, I was also looking up to people, but in prison. But now it was forming into something positive. The only thing is that the individuals that I was actually gauging with weren't always people that I was actually seeing eye to eye with, because many times, and it could have been something that I was telling myself, or it could have been something that I told myself that I knew, again, telling myself, but it was almost like, okay, they arrived. They're at the pinnacle and hold the gavel of being able to judge who's still in their criminality and who still isn't cooked. And I'm on the other end of it, to where it's like, I'm not gonna go along with that, but at the same time, I want to be a part of that.
Sure.
So from afar, I was watching it, and also surrounded by close individuals like Johnny Howe, and people that were giving me the same feedback, but in a different way.
Right.
They weren't giving it to me in a way where you're ostracized because you're still in your criminality. It was more like, nah, this is things to consider, things that could help you out.
Sure.
And it all evolved into me living the same way, but in a positive way, which is I could do that as well. And I was surrounded by individuals that were so great in their way of being, imperfect as they were, imperfect as you guys were at the same time. It was just amazing to be able to take from that. And even though I was the young one of the bunch, to honestly be motivated and say, I could do that too. Like, I could do that too. Like, I'm going to be good at that too. And it just, this bar that was set for me, or that I set for myself, became my way of catapulting myself into, not even myself, became a way of being able to push myself even further, thanks to everybody that was around me, whether they liked me or not, or whether I liked them or not. And now I could honestly say that, like, I grew up around those individuals. Like, everything, the majority of things that I know, like, I learned in prison, and I literally grew up in prison. And much credit to the individuals that taught me well, and that I was able to take from, because that's the reason why I'm sitting here in my own apartment 3 blocks from the beach, being able to talk to you guys about how I'm free and how I'm grateful.
Right.
That's right. That's amazing. And, I just want to say there was definitely a shift in my experience in my 20 years of incarceration, between like my first 10 years and my last 10 years. And it was like during the last 10 years when they started making some real transitions in introducing programs. They add the R to CDC, and you could tell like there's some guys who really want to get it. They really want to make the most of their time, and they want to fight and do the work that's necessary to be free. And you two gentlemen, I've always been so impressed. And to speak to Hugo, like, yeah, sometimes you don't always see eye to eye. And I'm a firm believer in the principle that iron sharpens iron, right? And also, to speak to Manny's point, the accountability that we had for each other, the community we built, the accountability we had for one another was just a really powerful thing. One of the things with Manny that stands out for me in particular, though, has less to do with self-help and like becoming a better person, and more to do with sports. So I was a coach. I was the coach of a football team, and Manny. So Manny has, I think we all have this inclination at times to give ourselves over to a little bit of confidence that maybe leans towards cockiness. And he's like, I'm a great athlete. I'm a great linebacker. And, to his defense, he is a really good athlete.
Most of the greats did that.
So we're in a championship football game, though, and I've got him in at linebacker, and I tell him, I said, look, your only job is to stop that running back. Your only job is to stop that running back. And people are telling me, like, can he do it? And I'm saying, yeah, he can do it. And I know he can do it. But on that play that I needed him to make the stop, the guy got the touchdown. And I remember I was so upset with him because of that accountability. Like, I'm holding you to this bar, but it was just a good example of a time how we're not perfect, right? We don't always make the tackle. We don't always make the catch in the game of football or in life. But the thing about you two guys is in those big moments, in those really big moments, the ones that really count. I'm not talking about a football game. Like, you guys showed up. Hugo with the speeches you gave to people that just moved them. Manny with your work with men inside, and just you guys showed up, and I appreciate that.
That's definitely true. I want to say something about that too. And before we get into talking about success stories, a program that you guys are part of, started on the inside and facilitating and leading, and you're still doing to this day out here and being highly successful. But can you just talk to what it was like to be sentenced to 32 years to life, and for Manny, and 3 consecutive life sentences for Hugo, and to be released after 15 and a half years with Manny and 18 and a half years with Hugo, to be out here now and to be free and just connected to those moms and sisters, brothers, you know, husbands, wives who are waiting on their loved one and are wondering, you know, with their sentence, is it going to be possible for me? And what are some of the things that they could do while they're in there to be in a position like you guys were? To me, you guys were like walking miracles. We remember the days when lifers first started getting dates. And then we lived in a new era where there were some of those very first people to get commutations. And you guys were some of the first ones that get called into that office and get on a call with the governor and to come back. And it was, you know, Jim Micheletti from Palma School, he says, on a daily basis, collect evidence of hope. And you guys are living evidence of hope. So we speak to that real quick.
Yeah. There's a lot there. I want to be honest, and I don't want people to feel like there's going to be days when their loved one just doesn't see the light right at the end of the tunnel. There were days for me, especially early on in the beginning, where it's just like I didn't see a way out of my current circumstances. And in fact, I just didn't believe it would ever happen. But what happened was the people that were supporting me were the source of that hope, right? They reminded me of what I was fighting for, and they also reminded me that I wasn't there alone. Like I really began to realize that it wasn't just me that I took to prison. I took parts of everybody who loved me with me. And you know, there was joys that they couldn't reach in their life, and there was things that they couldn't experience because the person that they wanted to experience that with wasn't with them. Right. So I would encourage though the families to continue to, you know, remind people what they're fighting for. And for their families, look, it's kind of like that thing where people talk about like manifesting what's possible in their life. They have to live in a way to where what they want is what they're acting out on a day-to-day. I didn't know if or when I was ever going to be released, but the mentality that I had after a certain point in prison was, look, I have the opportunity to either live a life of meaning even while I'm in prison, or I could just keep giving into the nonsense and just get deeper into prison. And I know that I didn't want to get deeper into prison, right? Like that wasn't a choice for me. So the choice that I had left was, hey, look, I can live this meaningful life even while I was in prison. And all those things that I did to either deal with whatever issues that I had, or to feed my spirit, or to, you know, produce meaningful friendships, to sharpen certain skills that I had, like all that work is what eventually led me to being free, right?
Right.
And I think that is the biggest thing that I see now in my freedom is at the time, even school. I remember when we had TEDx in 2013 in Ironwood, and I was talking to the director of CDC at the time. And I said, I just don't understand why you're doing all this to educate me for free when my education is for nothing if you're not ever thinking about letting me go. You really have just wasted an asset. You've educated me to do what? Sit in a cell and be a clerk? Like what is the end all be all to that? And then I quickly realized that taking advantage of those opportunities while I was there is the reason that I'm successful now, right? Like, so it was the work that you're doing inside is not useless. You're actually building the foundation to the dreams that you want when you get home. And it's going to make all that possible. So I would just like for people to always remember and consider that, and to each day live it as if you're getting out tomorrow, and making sure that you're getting prepared.
That's
right. Be prepared, because you never know how those opportunities. I didn't know I was going to get a commutation. I didn't know that, you know, I was going to be sitting in the front of the board in my 15 and a half year. I thought I was going to board in 2036. Like I didn't know, but I was living in a way that if I was given the opportunity, I was able to make the most of it. And there weren't things that they could count against me.
That's a key right there.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. Hearing Mannie speak about that reminds me of the day I was sentenced. And I remember my lawyer following me into the little holding tank that they had right next to the courtroom that I was at. And I remember asking him, I was like, what does that mean? And he was like, well, you have 3 consecutive life sentences. I was like, yeah, but when am I going home? Like, what does that mean? And he was like, well, we're just going to have to appeal. But as of right now, I mean, you're going to have to do 3 consecutive life sentences. And then he goes, I just want you to remember one thing. He goes, everything happens for a reason. And this is in that moment, like I've heard this phrase before, and it's such a played out phrase. But at that moment, I really did not want to hear that phrase. I did not want to hear that this has some type of reason behind it, because I don't want to know what that reason is. All I know is that I was sentenced to basically dying in prison. And I'm like, hell no, I don't want to hear that part. And I
Right.
remember just like sitting there by myself in this dark, small cell that was just big enough for one person in the toilet on the side. And I'm just like, what the hell is going on? Like, is this serious? Like, is this true? Like, is this reality? Well,
And you were
the years went.
16, Hugo?
Yeah, by that time I was already 17. But the reality is that as the years passed, like birthday cards and Christmas cards dwindled to nothing. As the years passed, like it was easier for my family to cope with. And again, no judgment. I love my mother. My mother loves me, but it was easier for her to cope with the stress of her feeling like her son was never going to come out of prison by her moving to Oklahoma and just simply like living on, moving on with her life and taking care of my
Mm.
siblings and paying her mortgage. And many people may have like reservations or opinions of that, but I respect and love my mother because she was doing the best she could with what she knew and with what she had.
No, I,
Long,
I can I can relate with that, Hugo. I just want to throw this in real quick. You know, in my own family, I experienced a similar situation where, and they said, you know, it's so hard to explain to people what happened to you. It's easier almost at times to act like you don't exist.
yeah.
And that, I mean, that's just it speaks to how we victimize our families with our poor choices. You know, so I just
No,
wanted to add that.
no, 100%. And I'm glad that you pointed that out because a lot of times people really don't even want to admit that that's the way it went down. But the truth
Right.
is that for me, that's the way it went down. Like
Right.
it was rare that I would get visits. It was rare that I would get like mail. I did not have a someone that I knew from high school or junior high coming to visit me. My quote unquote friends consisted of gang members that were also going through the in and out process. But the thing about all of that is that as the years went on, like the words that my lawyer told me rang true. It became true.
Mm,
It became so true because I started growing. Literally, I started maturing in prison. I
that had
started
happened for a reason.
understanding, even
Yeah.
though I didn't have a clear idea of what I wanted to do or who I wanted to be, and
Hmm.
even think about that because I felt like, oh my God, in black and white, it really honestly says that my earliest estimated parole date is 2075. It still felt like there was something in there to say like just keep on going, something's gonna happen, something's gonna
Right.
give. And just that inner hope of just feeling that, really I started really understanding that things were happening for a reason. I was
Yeah.
learning things and I started recognizing myself for who I really was instead of who I was pretending to be. But most importantly, it all started clicking like Legos. It all started making sense. It all started, one thing was leading to another. I met this person, and then next thing you know I met this person, and then next thing you know I knew people from outside, and it grew into something that was supporting me into becoming myself. And
That's right.
it was great going to groups, wanting to go home. That's great. But what happens when I come home? Like,
Mm,
I would say that more than anything else, what really honestly helped me out while being in prison is really honestly getting to know myself, and more importantly, start questioning that self inquiry of like, what do I want for myself? Like,
right.
what do I want for my future? And if my future does end here, if it does end in prison, like, how do I want to live my life in prison? And
Sure.
Right.
it was a bumpy road. It wasn't smooth. But what I will say is that it was in those moments of deciding and making tough decisions for myself where I felt that there was going to be this strong repercussion of people judging me or saying that, oh, he became one of those, or oh, now he's a groupie because he does nothing but groups, or now this and that. It the opinions of others really didn't matter. I'll take that back. The opinions of others did matter, but the people had
Mm,
changed. It was no longer
sure.
the people that were driving me to doing negative things. It was now the opinions of those individuals, like you, Jay, like you, Rich, Ted. It
Sure.
was individuals that I value their opinion, and even though from time to time we wouldn't see eye to eye, it was like it made me think, like, why the hell would he say that? Like, why would he say that to me? And then it really honestly helped me. And iron does sharpen iron. And all
There you go.
credits for any credit that I get for saying anything. Um, I give credit to my brothers, not only in Soledad, but throughout the prisons that I was at, because that's where I grew. And when I say that, I want to be very clear what I'm talking about. I'm talking about being able to honestly know who I am and then live out that life. And the byproduct of that was my freedom.
That's
Dang.
Next thing
right.
you know, like, I didn't, commutation wasn't even in my vocabulary to know. I just knew pardon.
Right.
I knew
Right.
clemency. I
Right.
told the guy, like, I went to my consult, my commutation hearing, and he goes, "You mean consultation?" And I go, "No, no, no, I mean commutation." And he goes, "No, no, no. Look, youngster. I've been in prison long enough, and what they've started is consultation, not commutation. And I wanted to honestly say, like, no, man, I know I'm right on what I'm saying. And it was amazing because it wasn't until that happened to me that individuals in that yard started really like recognizing, like, man, we could do that. Like,
Sure.
I can file for that. I can do that. And it just, the trajectory of finding a way out sooner became hopeful, became reality. And that's when this thing just started carrying on. And it just happened to be that it was me, but it could have been any of us. And by
Right.
all means, I really am appreciative for the experiences. And now I understand what that guy meant when he said, man, everything happens for a reason.
For a reason. That's great.
Yep.
That's great, Hugo.
So we're thank you guys both for sharing, and so many of our friends ended up getting other commutations. Jason was one of them. Ted was one of them. Remember Eric Alvarado, Ezekiel Malgoza, Justin Chung, and the list goes on and on. And people started putting them in, and then they started looking at their merits. And so we just want our audience to know, if you got a loved one that's been in there for a long time, has been doing good for a long time, and has taken a stand for, like Hugo talked about and Mannie talked about, for who they want to be and what they want to do in life, come what may. When they get in touch with that awareness, so many things, like Hugo said, the byproduct could be freedom, and for him was freedom. So earlier in the introduction, I talked about that I saw you guys both on the video, The Feminists on Cell Block Y. It's been out for a few years now, but Mannie, you were featured in it. I know Hugo was in it. Tell us a little bit about, when I look on Instagram and for success stories, it's under prison feminism. Would you talk about what that term means and how it ties into the work with success stories?
Yeah, I really appreciate that question. So first of all, it's kind of funny, like prison feminism came out of this, like, really just description of what we were doing, right? Like, at times when you're starting something that is unheard of, like, you really looked, especially in prison, we were looked at as like the weirdos. Like, what are you guys talking about? So the term really just explains what we were doing. But it also comes up a lot. Like, people will ask us, well, does everybody who goes to your program, are they identified feminists? And the answer to that is no. But that doesn't mean that that's not where our work is informed from, and for a very important reason. So if we're looking at, like, so you talked about early on about how, how you would either dominate somebody through intelligence, or, how you looked at your prowess of being able to play a sport a certain way. Like, this idea of manhood and where we get our sense of power from, like, isn't unique to just those. Like, the system, patriarchy, tells us that that's how we gain our power, right? There's like four principal ways in which men can gain their power, and that's either through some type of domination, whether that's through the emotionless state, which really just means our inability to be vulnerable, right? Like, we should not be vulnerable, right?
Sure.
The objectification of people or women, or our ability to make money, right? So if we're acknowledging that when men in their individual lives are walking out this toxic masculinity, right? But when the society itself supports that thinking, right? That's the patriarchal system that we're talking about. So then the feminism aspect becomes that's the answer to that, right? So, like, feminism, people look at typically, and they're like, okay, well, feminism is a movement to end sexism, sexual exploitation, oppression, or the objectification. Like, well, what does that have to do with the program? And then the truth of it is it becomes the answer, right? Feminist politics allows us to love without disposability, right? It encourages us to be vulnerable, because this idea that only men are masculine and only women are feminine, like, no, well-rounded human beings have not only the ability to be both, but they should be both. And that's what makes us human, right? And these idea of, like, quote unquote gender norms, what begins to happen is if we truly take a good look at patriarchy, which we begin to value masculinity more than femininity. And if, the men and the women are tied to those because the gender norm says one should be one way, one is the other, like, one becomes more important than the other, right?
Sure.
And we're saying
historically that's been true, right?
Exactly, right? And then the systems are no different. So the systems that are born out of patriarchy, when we talk about, like, mass incarceration, like, we all know that punishment right now is the dominant culture, right? So we're going to look at, like, abolition feminists. What we're saying is punishment should not be the way that we address harm. So those hundreds of years to life that we were all sentenced to was not the catalyst of our change, right? No. Like, it was the people who were coming in, the community-based organizations that were giving us what we needed.
It was the investment. It was the investment in us as people that transformed us, not the time.
Exactly, right?
Right.
All of a sudden, now it's not we're not, it's the ability to love without disposability, right? Like we're not just disposing human beings. We're saying no, that these human beings can be restored, right? It's just about us investing in them what they need.
Sure.
So when we think about like what the feminist politic is, that's how it informs our work, and that's why it's important for us to make sure that like that information is getting out and people are making that self-discovery and being aware of this like punishment culture that is associated with patriarchy, and how the feminist thinking and language is the answer to that, because it's so like it permeates throughout our society, right? And if we're not bringing attention to that, and specifically with men in prison, because that was the most hyper violent, environment, and things were going on, and we were like, damn, we have a choice not to do this, right?
Let me ask you this, Manny. Is there such thing as healthy masculinity? And if so, what does it look like?
Sure. So healthy masculinity is a masculinity that we define, though, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like it's not the social norm of saying like, oh, I got to be this tough guy or I got to dominate. Healthy masculinity may be hugging my brother when I know that he's in need, right?
Sure.
Or lending a listening ear. Like it comes with me realizing that I'm the only me that will ever exist, and that's where my value comes from, and not this idea that the money that I make or my ability to be violent or whatever. Like for me, if I'm thinking about my masculinity means knowing when I need to be both. Knowing when I need to let my vulnerability shine, knowing when I need to have certain aspects of me to give myself fully so that I can be fully human. We're getting to a point where we need to allow men to be fully human. And that means to express our full range of emotions. So if a person was asking me what does healthy masculinity look like to me, it means that we are able to express our full range of emotions without being demonized for it, right? Without being called soft, right? Without being these terms that are attacking us because we don't fit, quote unquote, what society says what masculinity is, right? Like,
right.
That's for me. That's what it is.
That's
Hugo,
great.
I remember I had never even heard the term patriarchy until I went to Success Stories, until I met Richie Reseda, who's the co-founder, and I never even heard that term. And I know that you were at one time the chairman of, was it the chairman or president? What was it? I don't remember the term.
Chairman.
The chairman of Success Stories. For our audience out there who's never heard the term patriarchy, and me and Jay have learned through doing this podcast is it's very important for us to define our terms. I've had conversations with you guys about, there are those who heard the term prison abolitionism and they think that it means shut down all the prisons tomorrow. And then they don't question their unquestioned assumptions with those who believe that. And then there's a responsibility on the other side for those who believe in prison abolition or whatever it is, prison feminism, to also educate your audience, to let them know, here's what I mean, here's what I'm talking about. So what would you define the term patriarchy and give us some type of example?
So Manny described it earlier. So the principles of what makes me more of a man is having a lot of women. So now I'm a pimp, I'm a player, I'm that guy, I'm the guy that always gets the women, that somehow, some way gives me the accolades of being the man. Another example is having money. I drive a Mercedes Benz, or I have a big house, or I have the money, so I'm more of a man than you because I make more money than you. And another one is, like what he said, is dominance. So it's when a society believes in that. It's when a society, I'm talking about even when women are like, no, man up. You need to do this, and this. The man's supposed to throw the trash out. The man's supposed to wash the car. The man's supposed to do this and that. Like, even when it could be patriarchal all around. So what I'm talking about is when a community believes in this, when a whole society believes in it, that's when it becomes patriarchy. So, so giving a clear example of this would be, like, for I'll use this for example. Like in prison, there's certain words that can be said that can trigger someone to immediately do something. And when I say immediately do something, I mean immediately act out violence. So act out in violence. So a word, I'll just be flat out and say it. In prison, using the B word, and using it towards someone else would immediately can possibly even end up in a violent stabbing or in a fight. And the question is why? Why is it that someone can control you to do what you want to do, even though you may possibly not want to do that, knowing that the consequences of that may be great? Going to the hole, getting another charge, possibly killing the person. Like, why is it that you yourself are willing to choose to go against yourself, and you're the one narrating this whole act? And that's when the questioning becomes like, what is it that you're telling yourself that you have to do, and why are you telling yourself that you have to do it? And
Sure.
it's this belief that's so embedded deeply in us. And I want to make one thing clear too. It goes the whole. We're not saying stop cheering. We're not saying stop being competitive. We're not saying stop being the person that makes you as far as like being a good athlete or high-fiving or saying, yeah, I told you I was going to make that three-pointer at the buzzer. We're not saying that part. What we are saying is, like, do not censor yourself when you honestly are feeling hurt. And instead of saying you're hurt, you're saying I'm pissed off or I'm mad. Instead of really wanting to express yourself for what you're really feeling, you sell yourself out, betray yourself, and start covering that up with violence because you're telling yourself that that is more acceptable than it is to start crying and saying, I'm hurt. I continue to use
quote
the example. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, like, for me, it what made it like transparent when I was in prison, right? I think that sometimes we forget that there were gifts that we had being in that environment because it made certain things like apparent right away if we were paying attention. And I think for me, when I was reading Bell Hooks, and I'll be perfectly honest with you, my introduction into toxic masculinity and all this, like there were some things that came up for me where I didn't necessarily buy in right away, right? Of course, I had to do investigation. I had to do homework. I had to educate myself on what we were talking about. Because at first, when I heard patriarchy, I thought I was going to have to basically apologize for my maleness, right? I didn't know that there was a whole system of things that were happening and that systems were based off of it because of this thing, right? But when I began to educate myself, one of the things that Bell Hooks, if I can quote her correctly, one of the things that she said about patriarchy is patriarchy has taught us that masculinity has to be proven by the willingness to conquer through fear and aggression, right? Like those are the ways that we have to do that. So when we specifically looking at like that is what patriarchy is, and it is done multiple things to us in our society because we have adopted that belief that the only way for us to prove anything is to conquer through fear and aggression. So that and being in prison, you see it every day. You like that is apparent to you every day. Like, oh, like people think that the only way that they can get power is through by doing that. And even when they're questioned in certain ways that is the answer or the resolution to that.
So I want to add something though, something very important. And then what I want to add is, why is this important?
That's awesome.
Like some people yawn at this conversation and say, oh, I see you guys are some of those feminists. Like and again, like what Richie was saying is there's assumptions of already knowing where we're going to come from. But why is this important? Like, why does this even matter? And why are we delivering this in prison? Well, what we do is we make it very clear. Like we're not, for the first time ever, we're not going to tell you what you need to do for yourself. For the first time ever, we want you to sit down, write on a piece of paper your top 5 most important things. And then we want to use that as a gauge as to like how you are living for that or living against that.
Right.
And then it just happens to be that this patriarchal way, this toxic masculine way of being stops us from actually being true to our top 5, our top most important things in life. And it has nothing to do with what I told you was most important to you. It has everything to do with what you wrote. You customized this list to say what you, and now let's talk
what's most important in your life.
Exactly. And
absolutely.
And now we have a conversation of how getting into that stabbing and being involved in that riot or doing certain things that you have not been doing that line up with your top 5 most important things. Now we're able to have a conversation. And it just happens to be that it goes back.
We lost your audio.
Yeah, I lost it too.
My emotions because that's the deepest weakness. What I ended up finding out is that my vulnerability was my deepest strength. What I ended up finding out whenever speaking in front of people is get fucking uncomfortable. The moment I get uncomfortable with saying the truth and being vulnerable, the rest of the audience, the rest of the people in the room are able to feel every single word that I say simply because they're able to relate, but they're not willing to say what I'm saying because they're still in this way of thinking, in this way of feeling like, man, I'm glad you said that because I was crying when my mom died, but I was crying in a dark cell and I wiped my tears the moment my cellie came back in from yard because I didn't want nobody to see me cry.
Right.
And the moment I was able to talk about my grandmother passing away and how she was my mom as I was growing up, the moment I was able to describe how I felt and choke up in front of people and even get a moment where it's like, man, I'm feeling kind of messed up right now. Like I'm drenched in my emotions right now and I'm kind of losing my composure in front of so many people. But it was in those moments where not only was I able to connect with other human beings, but other human beings were able to connect with me.
That's right.
And I recognize, and I'll say it again, and I'll say it constantly. My vulnerability is not a weakness. My
No.
vulnerability
It's
is
a
a
strength.
strength, and we all have that same strength, that same ability to connect with human beings and being able to understand each other in a way where we don't have to agree, we don't have to condone, we don't have to justify, but we can actually start getting an idea, a picture of what the story looked like from our angle. And
So
that's where growth comes from.
what I'm
Yeah.
hearing you guys both say in different ways is that really what success stories is about, what prison feminism is about, what challenging patriarchy is about. It's about getting authentic. It's
Yeah.
about authenticity.
100%.
It's about
100%.
getting back. It's about getting back to a point where people are seen as people, right?
Sure.
And
Sure.
then when we get to that point, now we have, like we talked about accountability early on. Like some of
Right.
our greatest strengths is we were holding each other accountable, and we must do the same thing, the same work that we men did inside. Society has to start doing, right.
Okay.
We have to start looking at our institutions. Are our institutions that are in ways in acting out violence to achieve control? Is that what we want, right?
Sure.
Like let's just speak plainly. The carceral system that we have currently, we know isn't working.
Right.
We know that when you sentence people to, arbitrary amounts of time, that's not what's conducing or is productive, or it's not bringing about any type of public safety. Like that's not what that's doing, right? Like
Sure.
we know that we need to start looking about it in those ways, and all of it is steeped in certain belief systems that we can then change, right? And one of the things that I think that we just haven't talked about in terms of success stories is success story sees the individual's success as the community success, right? Like the idea is to build a community that is going to support other individuals in doing things for themselves, in serving the community that makes them successful, right? Like there is no one thing that's outside the other. We're in this together, right? And one person's suffering or one person's whatever they're going through, right? Like we have the ability to help them in that, right? The minute that we start saying, well, that's not our problem, right? We've only just created a situation where that person can get worse, because now we don't see it as our problem.
Hugo, go ahead.
I was just going to say this. So you spoke about success and personal success. And for me, it starts with the individual, right? And for both of you, I imagine it's also true that while you were inside, you had personal transformation, success in your own right, and you got authentic with yourselves. How has that, or has it, translated to your success out here in the community?
Bro, I never, I literally, I didn't, man, I'm even speechless right now. I remember when the governor commuted my sentence, and I had said to him on the phone that I was gonna, well, actually, this was when I was being investigated for commutation, but I was being recorded, and I said, is the governor gonna listen to this? And he was like, well, there's a possibility he will, but most likely he won't. And I go, well, I want to say something to him. And then I said, like, look, Governor Brown, you don't know who I am, but my name is Hugo Daniel Gonzalez. And one day we're going to meet, and I'm going to shake your hand, and you're not going to regret the day that happens. So after I said that, I was like, that sounded kind of cocky. Like that didn't even come out right, but it was already,
it was there. It was recorded. Yeah.
Like there was no taking that back.
Yeah.
So I left, and I wish I wouldn't have said that, but that was quoted back to me the day that he granted my commutation. But not only that, though, that actually came to be where I was actually giving him an award. I had filet mignon and salmon with him. We had a 4-hour conversation, and I was able to actually get the inside scoop by the governor that actually signed off for me. Then after that, CIA comes to get me at work. I end up in Marina Del Rey, and I speak in front of 60 White House officials where they give me, and mind you, I really don't care for the president that we had at the time, but I still love the fact that only after being out for 3 months, I had the presidential coin and presidential pin in my hand, and I was able to speak
That's amazing.
to 60 White House officials.
That's amazing.
Supporting the First Step Act, but also speaking in front of the dude that wrote the speech for Trump, that on supporting that actual act. So it was
that's incredible.
I mean, and that's just the beginning of it. Now I'm actually going to go to Loyola Marymount Law School. Like, what the fuck? I can't. Look, honestly, I'm gonna just go ahead and be blunt. Man, I'm still speechless on how life has turned out for me, and it's almost like a movie.
That's right, Hugo.
And I enjoy it. It's ups and downs, but I'll tell you right now, I wouldn't trade this for the world. And it's just amazing to know that finding my authentic self has opened so many doors so many doors for me to walk into and be in such uncomfortable positions, but actually find comfort in that. Actually find comfort in that, knowing that, you know what, I'm bringing myself, and myself is more than enough. To knowing
That's
that,
right.
like, I was meant for this, and reality says that I was meant for this because it's happening as I'm speaking. So
My
I
hell
man.
yeah.
told you you had potential.
My man.
I
I
think
love you, bro. I love
What
I
you, bro.
about
think
Manny?
Proud of you,
I
man.
think for me, right,
Awesome dude.
the moment that I had done enough self-discovery, and got real with myself about my insecurities,
Mhm.
um, whatever issues that I was having, my hopes and dreams, I believe walls started to fall, right? So I think that we as human beings, we will build up these walls, right? Whether they be, we think, our geographic location or our socioeconomic upbringing, or like we'll bring up all these barriers, right? To why everybody else's experience is so different from our own. And then what's happening is, what we're saying is, we don't have a lot of commonalities, right? There's not a whole lot that we share. And the moment that I became aware of what I was struggling with, um, and listening to other people open up about things that they were struggling with, I realized that a lot of our stories, there was a lot of intersectionality there, and that we're not all that different.
Sure.
And it allowed me to see parts of me in everyone, right? And if I could have that commonality with it, if I could look at somebody else and see me, right? Like, now we're in this together. And I think that having that mindset is the reason to, like, it doesn't even feel right when I'm not when I feel like I'm not in the trenches with somebody else trying to make some self-discoveries with them, right? Because as they make self-discoveries, I'm still discovering things about myself.
Sure.
Whether or not it may even be from afar, right? Like, even watching the brothers, right? When I watch you guys do certain things, it's just like, I feel like it's me, that is also having those accomplishments, right? So it's just this circle and this idea of that, look, we're all just fragmented pieces of a whole picture, right? That doesn't mean that, like, so if we're all fragmented pieces of the whole picture, like, we may think that we're not in this together, but no, we all need one another in order to get the picture complete once again, right? Like, we have to come together, mend whatever broken pieces that we are, heal together, provide whatever resources that are needed, so we can get back to our whole selves and create this whole beautiful picture that is our life's existence.
That's
So,
right.
I mean, I think that that's the way that when I'm looking at that, when I was able to discover that about myself, it just
Yeah.
carries me
That's
from
what's
day
up.
to day.
That's what's up. Hugo, a minute ago you talked about going on the inside. What is success? What was Success Stories doing pre-COVID for us, going into county jails, going into prisons? What are you guys' goals there? And what are you guys doing now in this, in this pandemic? And does Success Stories, does it do other things besides going into jails and prisons with your guys' program?
I'm glad you asked that, because COVID for us, it was actually a moment, and Manny and I were talking about this the other day. Like, there's so many organizations and companies that didn't make it through COVID, whereas we actually did the opposite. We grew. We were able to adapt, and instead of having to go into prisons, go into county jails, we actually use technology, Zoom, to our advantage, and now we're able to reach further than we were ever, without having to travel anywhere. But I also want to mention something, and that's what we're doing right now. But I want to mention the fact that it's so amazing to be able to be in prison, help create a program, a curriculum, and then actually come out here and then see it all come to fruition in a way where we're walking into a downtown LA skyscraper and we have an office there. And while people are talking about different conversations of what their business is like, our business is prison, and we're talking about prison, and we're talking about how we're gonna make things different, and how we're gonna change things, and how we're gonna make things move. So just to be able to be a part of an organization that comes out here, becomes a reality in the free world, and then see individuals like you guys and do the same thing from your angle, like, it's not a coincidence that we're out here, and it's not a coincidence that we're reaching it in such a way that we're reaching it, because truth of the matter is that we were all meant for something, and I'm extremely blessed to acknowledge the fact that I'm doing what I was meant to do, and I know that each and every one of you are doing the same thing.
It's a
And,
great feeling.
I think it's powerful to think about it this way. Success Story started at one prison. We got out, then it went to 4 prisons. Then we got a contract for 7 additional prisons. Then we were going into, county jails and stuff like that. So pre-COVID, there was this idea of like, okay, we're doing prisons. And then as Hugo said, like we had to adapt very quickly when COVID started hitting. So now we were able to work with the community, and we're able to work with the community all over across the country. We deliver a program in New York. There's talks of delivering program in DC, in Chicago. And now, my personal thing, something that's close to my heart, right? Like we're able to work with youth organizations. So to see this thing that we started inside to kind of heal with one another, and to now know that we're having these talks in society, and it's just as needed in society in different organizations as it was inside, like that for me, and I honestly get another sense of value, right? Like I didn't know when we were sitting in prison having these conversations and developing curriculum out that I was going to be needed in the community in the way that I am. We're sought after now, right? Like it's outside of corrections. It's different when you have people coming to you and say, hey, I got this group of 14 to 18-year-olds, man, that are really going through a hard time. And they've seen your documentary and they question and now they want to know, will you guys, are you guys willing to come through? And it's like, yeah. And then, you question like, well, do people really want to show up for 12 weeks, 2 hours at a time? And then like, they're eager to be there. Like, 12 weeks, that's it. Like one day, like they want more. Can we do this twice a day? And then when they're done, it's like, which is why we have our alumni program. They can come back and get resources there and continue to get training. So to be needed in that way and to see that we can serve our communities in that way for me was like, okay, like it gave me a sense of a worthiness and knowing that I could give back. And it's almost a form of restitution when you think about it, right?
Yeah.
Like we have the opportunity to provide information in a different way of viewing life so that people don't end up in the same circumstances that we were all in, right? Yeah. By buying into this falsehood of that I have to act this way because this is what is expected. Right. Like that in and of itself, if I did nothing else, that in and of itself is gift giving every day. For sure. The fact that I'm contributing to somebody saying, you know what, I don't have to act out in this harmful way. I have every right to speak out in this way or cry or get clear what's important to me or have future-based thinking and, long-term thinking and all that. Like, and to be that example, people look at us, especially Hugo and I, and be like, oh, you guys did how much time in prison? And like, it's almost unfathomable to them. Like, wait, what? And to be able to speak to them in that real way. So yeah, being able to, talk to young kids, being able to talk to community members, right? Being able to have a group of men who are successful in their own right. I remember I was running a group and the gentleman had been working in radio for over 40 years. Yeah. So he was successful in his own right. But to see him question how he may have been acting out in his masculinity and how it damaged certain relationships in his life and how he's looking forward into using certain things so that his grandchildren aren't coming up in a society like that, to where him and his son can mend different things and they could talk about like, bro, where else do we get that other than doing community work?
Right.
That's real.
Okay. Well, here's what I want to share with you, with both of you guys, and we'll conclude with this question, and then I want you to share about your social media. When I was growing up, I heard that term, "be a man," and so many guys in prison still use that kind of terminology. Man, he needs to be a man, and I never ever once remember that term being defined. What does it mean to be a man? And what I always heard was, don't cry, don't be a sissy, don't be a puss. If you guys are going to fight, I don't want to hear about it. If you're going to cry, I'm going to give you something to really cry about. And then what we do is, like, oh, you want to cry? You want to, dad? Or I come into my mom, I come into my dad and say, oh, someone hit me, or this is what happened. And they said, don't come in here. Well, get back outside and play. I don't want to hear it. And then what I learned to do was just keep those emotions inside. It was not safe to take those emotions. Like Hugo was talking about, that vulnerability. I learned that vulnerability was not a good thing. And I would take those, suck it all up and keep it in and keep it in and keep it in. And I didn't learn how to deal with it. And it wasn't until 2009 when I read Joe Ehrman's book, Season of Life, that totally blew my mind. He, for the first time, defined what it means to be a man. And Joe Ehrman defined it in two ways. And he said the first is, it's all about how you live and how you love, about your character that you live by today and how you love people. He said, I talk about those people on the planes that went down during 9/11. Not one of them was saying, well, good thing I scored those 5 touchdowns. Let me make this last call and remind people how much money I made or how good of a basketball player I was or how many women I slept with. Nobody was making those calls. Well, the calls they were making were, tell my mom I love her. Let me call my wife. It was about telling the people that you love them, that you miss them. What type of a father are you? What type of a brother are you? What type of a son are you? What type of a colleague are you? Are you living with character traits to add value to the people that you love the most in this world, and even the neighbor that you don't know? And the second he said was living for a cause that's greater than yourself. That every man should get attached to being a part of service. And I hear that in your words, the character that you both live by, the way that you love people by going back in. I know so many people, they don't, that's the last thing they want to do is go back into prisons or jails. And the way that you're willing to go back for your brothers and sisters, and living for a cause that's bigger than yourself. And I guess the last question that I would have before asking for our audience how they can reach out to Success Stories, how can they find you guys on social media, is are there any challenges that you've experienced either from out here or in there? Because I've talked to some of family members who still hold to those ideas, and I said, man, you need to watch this video from Joe Ehrman on what it means to be a man. I hear it from women in grocery stores. You better shut up. You better stop being a sissy, or I'm going to tell your dad on you when you get back. You know, and I hear that and I go, man, that kid's got a rough road ahead of him if he starts believing that stuff. So what are some of the challenges that you experience? Is there any pushback? I remember on the Feminist and Cell blog why there was one guy said, my kid's got to walk to school. What's the pushback?
Absolutely, there's been pushback. I think for me, I've noticed it in like when you're dealing with professional men, especially, and the difference in dealing with somebody who's in the professional field as opposed to like men who were when we were in prison, this hyper violent environment, and the pushback that we're getting there is you have to remember that these men in these positions have gained a sense of power from patriarchy. So I'm asking them to investigate something that is serving them, right? And probably who has served them for a long time. And really quickly, I want to back up. Even when I hear someone says like, "What is being, what does being a man mean to you, right?" Or what would you tell someone the definition of man? And I would say just be a person of integrity, right? Because a lot of the times when we're telling somebody to man up or be a man, like it's still steeped in those origins of patriarchy, right? Like in what that means. But when I'm telling you to be a person of integrity, it goes back to the second aspect of what you were talking about, right? And is make sure that you're the person whose behavior is supporting the things that you're saying is most important to you, right? When we talk about our family, our community, our work, like all that, make sure that when you go out in the day-to-day, that people can read that in your language, in your body language, right? To be that person, to be the person of integrity. So I try to make sure that I'm watching my language. And language is sometimes it's difficult because a lot of times, and I think specifically for men, the challenge is this that we run into. A lot of us are participating in a system that we're not even aware exists. Like you're not even aware of it. So until we're educated about it and we see that how it affects us in a multitude of our ways, right? When we're seeing that our relationships are suffering, because if like Rich talked about, if I'm bottling things up and I'm not sharing my emotional self, I am not giving myself over freely to the people who I'm saying are most important to me. So I'm giving them a fraction of who I am, right? And then there's like resentments and things that are building up within me because I don't have the permission. I haven't given myself. This is the scary part. We are not giving ourselves the full permission to be who we are as human beings.
Right.
And then that stuff creates things within us to now everyone around us is suffering. Right.
Thank you, Mannie.
I'm saying that we don't have to do that any longer. And
Right.
It's a challenge because sometimes certain people have been participating in the system for so long and they have things to gain from it. And what we have to do is get them, like Hugo said, get them to discover for themselves that the continued participation in the way that it's happening now is repressing them and oppressing those around them.
Right.
And I think that's important.
Thank you, Mannie. Hugo, how can people find out about Success Stories?
So you could go to our website, successstoriesprogram.org. And get connected, not only be able to like see what we have, but we have a different sections of resources, and it gives a clear explanation as to what we're about. And then we're always open to getting emails or any type of feedback. And one thing I want to mention that Mannie was mentioning is when you talked about what kind of resistance or what kind of backlash, for a better term, we receive from me. We welcome resistance. We welcome an individual that takes a belief as a reality and as truth, to be able to express it, because it's in those conversations that an individual could actually be able to like
That's right.
listen to himself speak about
Mhm,
how he's
mhm,
limiting himself or
Sure.
herself. So
mhm.
these are very important keys that make us who we are and make us as unique as we are.
That's
Sure.
great.
But yeah, once again,
So
it's
yeah,
successstoriesprogram.org. For anyone and everyone that's interested or wants to know more, please hit us up, and we
yeah.
will be more than glad to respond.
You can also reach us at Success Stories Program on Facebook. You can reach us at Prison Feminism on Instagram and Twitter. You can reach out directly to me as a growth coordinator, which is Mannie, Mannie, at successstoriesprogram.org. You can send me an email, Hugo as well, Hugo, Hugo, at successstoriesprogram.org. You can reach out to us by email. And then, of course, you can always check out our documentary on YouTube, The Feminists in Sub Block Y. And, you know, I think that's pretty much. And then for those of you who,
That's it.
you know, are in the position to help out, either volunteer time or maybe you have finances that you can contribute to the cause. Because I mean, at the end of the day, it's all takes work. You can donate on our page, or you know, you can donate our time when we need like research help or data entry search or however that works out. But yeah, reach out to us.
Mannie and
Community
Hugo
effort.
from Success Stories.
Awesome.
Thank you so much
good
for
to see you
joining us
guys.
today.
Thank you guys for having us.
Thank
This
you
is
for
awesome,
having
man.
us.
Keep up the great work.
Yep.
Thank
Keep
you.
it up, man.
Likewise.
Talk to you guys soon.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to The Prison Post, a production of the Crop Organization. We'll be sharing more stories from the world of prison reform and restorative justice, so please join us. You can listen to The Prison Post on all major podcasting platforms. Subscribe to our video cast on YouTube and like us on Facebook at The Prison Post and at Creating Restorative Opportunities and Programs.